You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanders,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is...
Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Flora Collins on the show with me today. She has an amazing new novel. It's called Nanny Dearest, and this is a phenomenal book. I'm just stumbling over myself to tell you about it because I've had an ARC copy of the book for a while, and it gives me so many vibes of I can't even begin to tell you what it compares to, but it is it's amazing. It's an amazing psychological thriller that I have a feeling that we're going to uncover some stories here today that will make it even more intriguing. Welcome to the show, Flora.
Thank you so much, Hank, and thank you for that kind intro. I'm very, very flattered and appreciative.
Oh, you're so welcome. I absolutely love the book, and I knew when I saw the book that, and I know that, you know, the old adage, you never judge a book by its cover, but we all absolutely do. And you know, I knew from the cover that this was going to be an exciting read, and it definitely lived up to it. So I'm happy to talk about it today.
They really hit it out of the park with the cover. I was very happy with it. And I love the red hair too. Very striking.
Yes, absolutely. Flora, before we get into all the great stuff that we're going to talk about today, we begin each show with the same question, and we have to start there. What is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Wow, yes. Oh gosh, this is going to sound a little bit ridiculous, but I honestly feel like I came out of the womb storytelling. Like, I cannot think of one specific memory that is when I decided I wanted to become a writer. I've always sort of babbled little stories to myself, to my parents, even as a very small child. When I learned how to read, I was reading voraciously. It's just really always been a part of who I am, that I just cannot pinpoint one moment when I pivoted and decided I'm going to become a writer. It just has always been part of me.
That's amazing. And you know, I get that answer quite a bit from people, that some people have a moment, you know, where it dawns on them that this is something that I want to do. But most people, it's just kind of an innate just thing within them that it's just who you are. Now, the story of, you know, how they went to write their first book and, you know, get publication and all of that, all those stories are varied. But sometimes there's just something inside that just says, this is who I am and this is what I'm going to do.
Definitely. And I think that I luckily had parents who were very supportive of that craft. So they never, you know, squashed my dreams. They were always very much advocating for me to pursue my writing in any kind of form that I wanted to. So I give them a lot of credit for that.
Were you a bookish kid? Were you, you know, one of those kids that walked around with her nose in a book all the time?
100%. And I'm also an only child, so I was kind of yeah. I was taken along a lot to, you know, grown-up dinners because, you know, we wouldn't have a babysitter at night. So I would just kind of be propped up somewhere with a book, you know, for hours on end. And I think that has really shaped who I am today. I obviously still love to read, but I also, you know, love observing, love being watchful, love meeting new people too. I feel like I'm very comfortable in new settings because of that upbringing I had, which is good for a writer.
Yeah, absolutely. In your book, Nanny Dearest, it definitely has a sensibility about it. It harkens back. It reminds me of the style of a lot of different books and storytellers that that make those books, obviously. But what was the first book that you can remember that really challenged you or let you know that thrillers and psychological suspense were, was ground that you were going to plow for yourself?
Oh, that's a great question. I've always really loved suspense. Movies, books. I read so much R.L. Stine when I was a kid. I loved Stephen King adaptations, like the movies. My parents were really into exposing me to like Hitchcock. As a really young child, I watched The Bad Seed when I was like 7 years old, which is like an old 50s movie about a child serial killer. It's just always been my favorite genre, and has again always stuck with me since I was a pretty little kid. I would say R.L. Stine honestly was like my big foray. It's a little bit more horror, but
Yeah.
there is a suspense element too.
So speaking of R.L. Stine and the difference between suspense and a psychological tale as opposed to horror, where do you find that dividing line where one separates from the other?
I would say horror is a little bit more graphic. There are more tropes in horror that you see sort of continuously. There's maybe more supernatural elements as well. I'm still a huge horror fan. I just do not write in that genre as much
Sure.
as I may have when I was younger. But they all sort of blend together. I think it's hard to say what differentiates, horror from a thriller from psychological suspense, because it's all suspenseful, it's all kind of scary in their own special ways.
It's kind of a misnomer because suspense to me is way scarier than a lot of horror, which just kind of becomes gross out.
Mhm.
What can we do to shock people, and which is a disservice, I think, to the horror genre when done correctly. It can really scare the bejesus out of you.
I also think that every book at the end of the day is a suspense novel. Even if you're reading a rom-com, if it's a good story, it's going to be suspenseful. You're going to want to know what happens next.
Sure.
Hopefully there's a fun plot twist. It doesn't have to be the kind of plot twist that you'll find in in a thriller, but a suspenseful read can be across all genres and any genres.
Sure, sure. Flora, with a lot of people that have known that they were writers, for the majority of their life, a lot of people have, well, everyone has interesting stories, but some people's story is, follows a bit of a circuitous route to get to the writer stage, to the published writer stage of their life. Um, what was your path, and have you always um, has your path always, been to get you to the place where you were a published writer?
I think it's always been my long-term goal. It was always a big dream of mine. I wrote a lot as a kid and as a teenager, and I won a lot of awards in high school for my fiction writing. That was kind of my shtick, my identity in high school. And then I got to college and I wanted to relax. I was an English major and I took creative writing classes, but I wanted to, have a college experience. I didn't want to, only focus on my writing. So it kind of fell to the wayside for a few years, even though I again was taking those types of classes. But I wasn't submitting to, contests or anything anymore. And then in 2017, I got laid off from a media job, and I was suddenly unemployed, and I was like, maybe I should dive back into my fiction writing again. So while I was applying to new jobs, I started writing fiction. And kind of from there, I was like, wait a second, you know, I want this to happen for myself. This has always been the long-term goal. Let's see what I can do for myself. And now today I work actually at a tech startup. So that's my day job, and I do content management, copywriting. So still in the kind of writerly field, but very different kind of writing than Nanny Dearest.
So, a lot of people have a collection of desk drawer novels or trunk novels, or sitting on the hard drive novels. In today's verbiage. But is Nanny Dearest the first novel that you wrote?
No, I actually had written one other novel before Nanny Dearest. Nanny Dearest is, yeah. As most authors I'm sure have told you, there's been other projects in the works before. Nanny Dearest was the one that I was lucky enough to have sold. I started working on it in 2019, and then 2020, December of 2020 was when it was sold. But previous to that, I had a whole other project that I was working on. It's a slog. It's a slog.
Oh yeah. Was it a suspense novel as well?
Yeah, it was a suspense novel, but it was much bigger, louder concept than Nanny Dearest is. And I think when I set off to write Nanny Dearest, I was like, I want to write a very contained suspense novel. I want it to be essentially a domestic suspense novel instead of an action-packed thriller, because it's somewhat easier for me to like sit in that quiet and then, kind of keeping track of all the different plot threads that are required for an action-packed thriller.
Sure. So having the experience of writing a book that you obviously put a lot of time and care into, and that book not selling, and then you go back to the drawing board and start a new project. I've had guests like fantasy author Brandon Sanderson, who tells the story of writing 13 novels, I believe it was, before one finally sold. And him telling me that, you don't understand. I would write novels until the day I die, whether they were published or not. If I would have never been published, my kids would have just inherited, stacks and stacks of novels that I had written, and that was just the way it was going to be. And then, I've met other writers who had one single novel and it wouldn't sell, and they go back and revise and they spend more time with it, and then it doesn't sell again. So they go back to the drawing board and they work on this singular story idea over and over and over again until it becomes the polished gem that it needs to be. And I often wonder about the motivation between both of those different mindsets. And writing a novel is a whole lot of work on the front end for something that may or may not pay off later. So what is it in your mind when you begin a new project, or maybe you have another project that you finish, that motivates you to either? I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, how do you know when a story idea is worth working on, or that maybe this was just not the right thing for the right time? Let me shelve it and start something new. What is that thought process like?
I think it honestly comes down to, and this is a boring answer, but beta readers,
Okay.
external forces.
That's completely valid.
I think I get it's difficult because I think I get very, very lost in subjectivity when I'm working on my own writing. Like, I truly have no idea to a certain point how good a project is or if it's working or not. But when I'm able to show it to people, like my agent, for example, see what he thinks, and, if he tells me this isn't working or it is, that's what sort of tells me whether I should keep on going with it or not. And I'm very, very, very lucky to have those kinds of people in my life. And I trust them. They advocate for me. They want what's best for me. And again, it's a huge privilege to have.
Dabble is a proud sponsor of Author Stories. Dabble is an easy-to-use cloud-based writing tool that gives writers a way to organize, plot, and create amazing stories wherever they are. Write in our desktop app on your Mac or Windows computer, tablet, or mobile device. Dabble syncs your latest version with the cloud on all your devices. Write anywhere and anytime inspiration strikes. We got you. Dabble is my preferred writing tool, and I think it will be yours as well. Visit dabblewriter.com for your free trial. You have an amazing story idea. You execute the writing and editing flawlessly, and now the only thing missing are readers. We can help you go from author to author superhero with Story Origin. Story Origin is a one-stop shop for marketing tools with a community of amazing authors working together to find reviewers, build mailing lists, increase sales, and collect feedback from beta readers. Everything an author needs, all in one place, from providing review copies or beta copies, reader magnets to ensure you stay connected with readers, easily distribute audio promo codes, universal retail links to send readers directly to the proper point of purchase, or provide direct download links for members of your mailing list. Story Origin has all the tools you need in one easy-to-use site. Use the promo code ASP21 at checkout when subscribing to the yearly plan, and you will get 10% off your first year. This code will expire December 31st, so hurry over and subscribe now. StoryOriginApp.com.
So, Flora, I love to ask people about where a project begins, because in one way, Nanny Dearest doesn't exist in any form or fashion one moment, and then either a character walks onto the stage of your mind, or you start thinking about maybe a news article that you've read or seen on TV or something, and then you start playing the what if game, and then in one sense, Nanny Dearest does exist, and it's your job as the writer to dig that story out and then excavate it and bring it out of nothing. But in a lot of your press material that I've gotten from HarperCollins, it says that Nanny Dearest is your first novel and draws upon personal experiences from your own family history. That has intrigued me for so long, and I want to hear the story about how you connect to this story in a very personal way.
Yes. Great query. So fortunately, I did not have a nanny who was quite as manipulative and troubled and emotionally unstable as Annalise, the nanny in Nanny Dearest. However, my family did hire a babysitter who was a pathological liar. And for, good reason, it didn't shatter the family or anything like that, but it was this family lore that my parents would tell me about, for years and years afterward. This nanny who starts out with like little lies, and then it grows into bigger lies, as pathological lying tends to do. With that kind of seed in my brain, I was like, how can I expand on this and make a story that is very, very loosely inspired on this babysitter and make it much, much, much creepier and much more sinister.
When did you have the idea for the dual narratives, the two different timelines, and how the story unfolds? Because that was one of the most genius parts of the setup for me, for sure.
Thank you so much. I just find it boring to write from one point of view. That's that's my very simple answer. I started writing it and I was like, oh gosh, I can't continue writing in just Sue's voice. Like, I'm just getting bored. I'm not having fun with this. So I was like, why not have Annalise's point of view pop in there? And that's how it went. I I was literally just sort of like, I want to spice things up. I want to change things up, and I want to have more fun writing this. So, and I find it very intriguing from a writer's perspective to try to get into the mind of someone who is as troubled as Annalise. Sue's also very, very, very troubled in the book, but Annalise is, you know, she's obviously suffering from, you know, undiagnosed mental illness, etc. So really forcing myself to get into her mind was like a very good challenge as a writer. I had a lot of fun doing it.
So from the beginning, we kind of get the idea that the nanny is up to something, that there's something askew with this nanny. You kind of step into that world right away, but having a narrative thread from her perspective is a bit off-putting in a way that it how can I say this? It kind of sets you off balance a little bit, because from the beginning I know that I should suspect her, I shouldn't trust her, yet seeing the story through her perspective kind of disarms the reader a little bit. Was that on purpose?
Yes, definitely. I really want readers to feel unsettled while they're reading the book. I want them to put the book away and still feel like they are a little bit rattled. Having been in the mind of these two women for however long it takes them to read the book. I remember, and this is not at all me comparing myself to Sylvia Plath, would never ever in a million years do that. But I remember when I read The Bell Jar for the first time in, I don't know, early high school or something, I read it very quickly and I put it away, and for days afterward I could not get out of the protagonist's head. And having had that experience, that reading experience, I was like, I want to see if I can hopefully accomplish that one day in my own writing. So point being that I love that you were unsettled reading Annalise's perspective.
Oh, absolutely. And one thing that I love to do, and I do this a lot, is I'll get a lot of ARC copies that are paperbacks or Kindle editions, and I'll read through the book, and then when the audiobook comes out, I like to go back and listen to the audiobook, because especially with suspense books and like this, there's a lot of payoff at the end, and then I start wondering, like what you did to set the stage early in the book for that, and then I'll go back and reread or listen to the audiobook, and it's a whole new experience of seeing the breadcrumbs that you leave. And so how much planning well, first off, are you a plotter, or are you a pantser in your writing?
I just learned the term pantser and very, very recently. I am definitely a pantser.
Okay.
I kind of just let it take me where it's going to take me. And, when I'm 200 pages in, let's say, I start really kind of, or maybe less than, maybe 150 pages into a manuscript, I'm like, okay, maybe I should start figuring out what exactly is going to happen next, how this is going to end, what these characters' motivations are. But for the first half or first third of a book, it's really, they're just really, the characters are really doing their their own thing.
I have a friend, Josh Hayes, who says that we're all outliners. It's just some of us outline before we write the book, and some of us get to the editing phase and then outline the book. And
Exactly.
so, do you, and once you've got the first draft laid out, do you then go back and start looking at places that I could do a little misdirection here, or I could plant a clue here?
Absolutely, yes. I also think once I get initial feedback, it's really always helpful, because then I can go back to specific places and add something here, add something there. This is very much on my mind because I'm currently in the middle of edits for book 2, so I'm sharpening that one right now, and it's really bringing to mind how much of a pantser a plotter. I think plot development is such a gift, to be a really, really good outliner who sticks their outline and gets it right the first time. Like I so wish I could be that kind of person. I think I always sort of know what feelings I want to evoke in my book and sort of what I want my protagonists' sensibilities to be like, but in terms of actual plot structure, not as much, which I'm sure you saw in Nanny Dearest. It's a very character driven book. It's not as much plot driven.
Sure. Yeah, for the last decade or so, there have been some amazing books that have come out that are psychological suspense and have unreliable narrators, and some kind of genre defining books, and and really kind of ignited our imagination of what you could do in this genre. As that has become popular, do you as a writer find that it's more difficult to find new ways of kind of pulling the wool over readers' eyes without it seeming like, with it feeling natural and not, just I'm looking for the next gimmick?
100%. I think it's super difficult, especially as a psychological thriller writer. And I spoke about this at length with Georgina Cross, who I know you've interviewed,
Sure.
Author of Nanny Needed. And we were both saying that I think it's gotten harder and harder because readers are a lot smarter, audiences are a lot smarter, and it's it's kind of it's a good challenge though. I will say it's really, really makes me want to go the extra mile and want to do that maybe controversial plot device or plot twist that maybe earlier on in my writing or in my career I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing. But I mean, it's 2021, almost 2022, and there are so many psych thriller TV shows, movies, books. It's we have to really we have to bring it up a notch whenever we're creating new work because of what you just said, because of all the twists and turns that we're so used to when we read and watch in this genre.
So what are you working on now, Flora? Like this book is out now. You're making a splash in the genre for yourself, and how do you, if we know anything about publishing, is that it's a long tail, or a long lead to get the book out there, and when we're holding the book in our hands, it's probably been off your desk for a year or so. So what have you been doing? Where does your creative mind turn next?
Well, I had a 2-book contract, so I've actually been in heavy edits for book 2 right now, which I'm hoping to hand in before the new year. And I sort of wrote that in 9 months. So between December of 2020 and then September 2021, I was working on that. And that, you should be seeing that on your shelf, I want to say late next year. So that's really been what my creative outlet has been. And I will say that the second book, as I'm sure you've heard from everyone, is so much harder than the first book. I feel so much more pressure, and I really want to make it perfect. And it's also very difficult to be working on edits when I'm also doing all this Nanny Dearest coverage. It's like I'm switching my brains from one character from one book to another character and another book. And obviously it's a great advantage. It's like, it's so cool to, have had a 2-book deal. Never complaining about that, but it is difficult. I will say it's stressful.
Well, today is release day for the book when people are hearing this, and you can grab it in Kindle edition or paperback or audiobook. Have you heard the audiobook yet, Flora?
I have not. I've heard clips of it, but I haven't heard the whole thing. I haven't listened to it.
Yeah, I got an advanced arc of the audio from Harper Collins, and I listened to just a little bit of it, and I'm really interested to see how the narrator is going to handle these. It's going to be exciting, I think.
I think so too. I mean, I actually advocated to have 2 different narrators because I was like, I want the voices to be completely like the literal voices, but also the characters' voices to be so different. Considering that those 2 characters are supposed to be very, very different, which
Right.
I think is a bit of a controversial choice, but I think it's going to work well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fantastic. Flora, Nanny Dearest, available everywhere now. Go grab it today at your local bookstore, or we'll have Amazon links in the show notes of this episode. Flora, if people are just discovering you and want to follow along, as the book comes out and follow along for what's next for you, where can they connect with you online?
Instagram is the best place to find me. That's Flora Collins _author.
Okay. We will link that up to make it easy for folks to find you. Nanny Dearest, available everywhere now. Go grab it today. Flora, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
This was so fun.
Now stay tuned for an audiobook excerpt from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
Hello, young one. What ghoulish tale of horror shall we explore tonight? Shall we watch The Creepshow? The Nightmare on Elm Street? Child of the night, give me your answer.
Which one would Mom kill us for watching? Said Buddy. Dad grinned and his eyes grew wide.
Which do you think, Child of the Jackal?
The Omen!
And we might have time for Omen too, if we hurry. She'll be home by 11.
I'll be back. Buddy ran to his room. He stripped down to his Yoda underwear and fished in the closet. 2 minutes later, he snuck back into the living room wearing his skeleton costume from last Halloween. He crept up behind his dad, who was cueing the movie. But David Rittermeyer was too clever for that. He spun around at the last moment and bared fanged teeth torn from paper plates, drawing a yip of surprise and a cry of, "No fair!" Daddy kicked off his Reeboks, plopped his smelly gym socks on the coffee table, another thing that Mom would hate, and killed the lights. The scary intro music began. The screen showed the silhouette of a boy, about Buddy's age. His shadow was a long, creepy cross. The Antichrist, the son of the devil. Born of a jackal on a night of astrological portent, destined to bring about the end times and the final battle of good versus evil. Buddy sipped Sunkist and scooted up next to his dad. As the movie got scarier, he slipped an arm through his father's and cupped his big bicep. Buddy could feel his father's pulse. Dads get scared too. They flinched together, shouted together, pointed at the screen and covered their faces together. Buddy pressed his eyes to Daddy's shoulder just before the on-screen maid shouted, "It's all for you, Damien!" and dove from the roof, hanging herself. Buddy knew which parts he was old enough to watch and which parts he wasn't. He trusted his dad to let him know when to look again. Occasionally, his dad tricked him into peeking too soon, but that was part of the fun. They kicked their feet at the screen and shouted, "Look up! Look up! Oh, idiot! Don't get yourself killed!" At the climax, the hero of the movie, Mr. Thorne, discovered a birthmark of 3 6s on his son's head and dragged the little Antichrist to the altar of the church, determined to spear his son with holy daggers and end evil forever. After it was over, the Rittermeyer men sat silently through the credits. David put an arm around his son and ran his fingers through Buddy's hair. He wasn't searching for devil marks. He knew there weren't any. And Buddy was certain there were no daggers in his father's hand either. Those things were just make-believe. Real fathers and sons don't do bad things to each other. They were queuing up Omen 2 when the power went out. "No," Buddy whined. "Not on movie night." Daddy went to the window. "It's the whole block. Sorry, Damien. How about, scary blackout. Go get the Ouija board out of the guest room closet. Cool. And candles." Buddy found the Ouija board, hidden under old clothes. When he shut the sliding door again, The sight of a monster startled him, and he let out an involuntary "huh" sound. It was his own skeleton-bodied reflection in the mirrored closet door. He stared at it. He liked the effect of moonlight on his cheeks. Spectral, haunted, his eyes big and white. He clacked his teeth at himself, picturing his own grinning skull under his child's flesh, and gave an evil laugh. He was answered by a scream. A woman's scream. High-pitched and far away. One of the neighbors? Buddy dropped the Ouija board into a patch of moonlight and sat with it. "What's going on?" he whispered, his fingers on the heart-shaped wood planchette.